Good morning, folks. I just thought I would send out a quick video here to chat through some of the procedures that are already having to kick in as a result of the COVID disruption going on. And the good news is, of course, that we can lean very heavily on what we learned last year, and we know that what we did last year worked extremely well in the vast majority of cases. So I think we can be confident that whatever this year throws at us, from what we learned last year, we're ready for this. And really this video is just to talk you through some of the procedures to remind you of what they are, and perhaps for some of the newer staff, just as a clarification again of the procedures that we followed. But if you remember last year, we talked about resilient teaching for blended learning. And basically, it was governed by two key principles. The first one was this continuity of learning for the pupils, but also sustainability for us as teachers. It is important that both of those are met, and everything that I tried to design last year and I'm going to advise from this year is based on those two principles. They're both very, very important for us. And if you remember, this notion of resilience was the measure of persistence of classroom systems, their ability to absorb change and disturbance while still maintaining the same relationships between their elements. So this is us in our traditional face-to-face classroom, and then of course we've got the students that are learning from home. How do you do two jobs at once? Well, you can't, and make that sustainable for teachers. You absolutely can't. So that's what brought us into our resilient teaching for blended learning, and there's our definition coming back in there again. It was this notion of turning into the wave. Now, what we had last year were some various examples of that, of how we did this. So what I'm going to do is just first of all show you a checklist that I've produced. I'm going to work through this quickly to give you a little bit more of an idea of how we're going to turn into the wave and be ready for this time. So the first thing you need to be doing in this little checklist here, and I've just put it in checklist form so you can go through, set up Google Classroom for all your classes, give them the code. These apps I think are useful for the students to have if they're accessing them via their phones, which if you use them in class, and they will be, then these apps will certainly make that easier. Then decide on your means of communication. I think most of us, from what I've heard, are going to be using the learning log. I think we discovered last year that it's an incredibly simple but very effective way of having the central hub of communication. So if you're using your learning log, you just need to inform your pupils of that. Pay particular attention to year 11s. They're new. They haven't had this experience. They haven't. And of course the new year 13s coming in. They might be able to pick it up more quickly, but particularly the year 11s. If you're using something other than a learning log, you need to obviously inform the pupils of that. What I would suggest though is this, that I think I do obviously as always want to give a degree of flexibility and application to this depending on your context and your subject and all sorts of things like this. But here's a simple fact. If we're doing similar things, the pupils will pick those similar things up in other people's classes as well, and therefore it'll just make everything work seamlessly. As seamlessly as we can expect in these circumstances. So Learning Log does the job. Certainly would encourage you to use it. So that's the first bit in terms of your preparations. Then, what about the pupils that are learning from home? There's those two principles that we talked about again last time. And we have those methods. Now, where are you going to find those methods? Well, they're contained on the website, the Resilient Teaching website. And each of them has a little bit of a video, short video explaining how they're being used. So if you need a refresher, or if you're new member staff and you need to go and find out about it, that's where you'll get it. If you're going to do with the continuity of learning, Mr. Robinson's email yesterday said, a balance between synchronous and asynchronous. Again, from my point of view, what is easiest for me, saves me most time and effort, is to live stream. Now, of course, that's not something that we're mandating or insisting on. If you're not comfortable in doing it, then that's your choice and that's fine. But if you're comfortable in doing it, it's certainly going to make things, at least in balancing these two things, that bit easier. So you set up your Google Meet in your classroom. If you don't know how to do that, some information is given here on how to do that in this video. You need to communicate the procedures. This is extremely important. It's part of that notion of turning into the wave. If we prepare in advance, then the procedures will fall into place, and that's what we're doing. So all the procedures, and then you need to practice. I've found with the year 11s especially, 2 year 11 classes, and they're not as familiar with these procedures, and it's taken a little bit of practice, but that's very, very important with them, and the year 13 new pupils especially. And then any others. So I've been already using the digital jotter in class. Again, if that term doesn't mean much to you, there you go. You'll find out information about it there. And I've been practicing that with year 11s just to get the procedures and get them comfortable with it. I guess what we're doing now is what we took pretty much the whole of term 1 to do last year, which was prepare for what came in January 2021. It feels like it's compressed a little bit more now. So it's really worth prioritising this and doing this early with the pupils. And then finally, if the pupils aren't in school, last year, if they were identified as close contacts, they were required to self-isolate at home. It was reasonable, therefore, for us to expect them to join a live stream because they shouldn't have been out anywhere. This year's going to be different. They might be in and out a little bit more. Day 2 and day 8 is when they're required to do the test. The availability of the test, as I'm sure you know, is not what we would like it to be at the moment. So they may be in and out a little bit more. But also it may be when they're out, instead of just self-isolating at home, they're off getting a PCR test. Just imagine having to drive down to Skillen for that or something. All of that to say there may be legitimate reasons this year why students at home may not be able to join a live stream if you're doing it. So how do we come back to our 2 principles? Again, continuity of learning for pupils and sustainability for teachers. Well, I'm going to record my lessons. Again, this isn't something that will require a mandate. It is an option for you to do. I think that balances those 2 for me. It makes it easier for me to do. The acceptable use policy has been sent out to the pupils. It does include the addendum that we added last year that Neil drew up about acceptable use in terms of pupils accessing live streams and things like that. So they have signed up to that, and you do have obviously that protection coming from the school with regard to that. So if you feel comfortable doing that, then that's certainly a way of balancing those 2 principles. Checklist here, check that you know how to record a meet, where does it save to, and how to share it afterwards. If you need any tips or help on that, you can speak to Neil or myself and we'll help you out with that. If you're not comfortable recording your lesson, again, think of the procedures. How are you going to support your pupils? Is it catch up or the work missed? What's the best way of making sure that they are supported in that so that the principle of continuity of learning for pupils is met? So hopefully, folks, that gives you a little bit of help as we're planning for this, and hopefully, especially in that checklist format, it might just help you to get yourselves organised a little bit more. It's extremely important for us on SLT that you feel supported in all of this. So especially in these times whenever we're not able to meet quite so much, if you need any support or if there are any questions or anything that arises, please just reach out to any of us, and we'll do everything that we can to make sure that you are as supported as possible through this process. We all could have wished for a quieter year this year, couldn't we? It's certainly not looking that way, but we rose to the challenge last year. We used these strategies and these methods, and they worked extremely well. We worked together and we supported each other. I'm very confident that we'll do the same, and we'll work together and we'll get through this. All the best to us this year.